Conspiracy theories are most often a smokescreen to divert us from the true evil.
My dad was right. This family's money is dirty.
Imagination is far more fascinating than reality.
Welcome to Working for Uncle Henry, the podcast. I'm the series author and your host, Angela Mullins. Well, Picasso has a huge body of work when you consider all the sketches he's done on napkins and scraps of paper. He also used crayons from time to time, as you'll see in this chapter. Chapter 14. Parker sat in one of the leather wingback chairs across from Henry's desk, where engineering drawings of a plane or drone covered with handwritten notes and mathematical calculations were strewn about. Henry casually rolled up the drawings to make their existence, or at least importance, less noticeable.
"Parker, I need you to go to Milan to deliver this."
Parker's ears perked up. Travel, at last. Italy. Henry opened a sturdy protective envelope and delicately removed a crayon drawing of a rooster. He studied it with great appreciation. Parker's first reaction was an unpreventable outburst of laughter. Seriously? Henry glared up at him with a reprimanding stare.
"It's a Picasso."
Oh, well, how old was he when he did that? 6?
"This sold for $15,000. Picasso once said, 'It took me 4 years to paint like Raphael, but a lifetime to paint like a child. You can deliver it safely?"
"Yes, sir," Parker replied, straightening himself. "Absolutely." Gerard entered with a tray of drinks. Parker accepted the one offered to him and began to sip, oblivious to the sedative the butler had added.
"Now, there are a few special instructions. You'll be meeting a man fitting this description."
Henry handed Parker a photo of a man in a beret, scarf, dark glasses, and overcoat. Parker's questioning gape annoyed Henry.
"His attire will look like that."
Henry poked the photo with his finger several times.
"He'll be paying upon receipt. A cryptocurrency transaction. You won't have to worry about that."
"Like Bitcoin?" Parker tried to suppress his surprised chuckle. "You know how?" Henry proceeded as if Parker had said nothing.
"It's quick, safe, and anonymous. The currency of the future."
Next, he handed Parker a black smartphone. "I already have a phone, sir."
"This one is heavily encrypted. Leave yours here."
"Okay," Parker replied with a yawn.
"You'll be transporting very valuable items for me at times. There'll be threats to steal them occasionally. You'll be wise to be discreet. Gerard has taken the liberty of adding a few items of clothing to your wardrobe, more suited for travel, hidden pockets and RFID protected."
Parker was impressed. He turned on the phone. The apps were different from his iPhone. He picked up his drink and gulped down the rest. Henry went over a few more pertinent details of the job. Parker tried to suppress a yawn and another and then another.
"Am I boring you, young man?"
Henry snapped, as if returning to his military days. Parker tried to sit up straight. "No, sir," he replied respectfully. He rubbed his face with his hands. "I'm just really sleepy all of a sudden." He shook his head back and forth. Gerard stepped up and put his hand on Parker's shoulder. "Perhaps you should lie down for a while."
"Perhaps indeed," Henry agreed. "You need to clearly understand your instructions."
"Okay, I'm really sorry. I'll be more alert after." Parker took his leave and headed upstairs. Henry and Gerard stood looking at each other without a word after Parker left. Occasionally, Gerard glanced at his watch. After several moments of silence, Gerard spoke. "It's time, sir." Together, they left the study, ascended the back stairway, and traversed the halls to Parker's room. Gerard listened at the door. Hearing nothing, he cracked it open just enough to see Parker lying on his bed, fast asleep. The two men slipped into the room. Henry lifted Parker's right arm enough to give Gerard the access he needed. Gerard gently pinched a spot of skin in Parker's armpit and injected a tiny GPS chip. Henry tucked Parker's arm back by his side, and the two men quietly crept out. Parker was both excited and nervous about the Milan trip. He had never been to a foreign country. He had never flown before either. But so far, so good. His instructions were to meet the man dressed in a cap, coat, and scarf in the plaza at the Duomo. His hotel was within walking distance, so he placed the package containing the Picasso drawing in his messenger bag, secured the bag across his body, and made his way down the street. He allowed time to stroll down the Corso Vittorio Emanuele and take in the sights. The brick and concrete streets were damp from a light snow overnight. Warmly dressed people going about their day congested the wide sidewalks. Henry had instructed Parker to behave like a tourist, the opposite advice most tourists get, but Parker was to be himself, an unemployed college graduate, seeing the world, and there was no shortage of those around the city. He snapped some photos of the scenery with his phone. He found the area a little bland, buildings all the same color, lots of concrete, people, vehicles. Cars, trams, buses, and scooters vied for who would go where, but amazingly all seemed to know what they were doing and moved along without incident. He switched from photo to video to capture the chaotic but amusing street action. Trams with wheels screeching and bells clanging glided along the dedicated rails like an invasion of mammoth snakes through the middle of the street, the same street as the cars. He passed a street vendor roasting chestnuts and breathed in the fragrance. He'd never eaten a roasted chestnut, only the occasional water chestnut mixed into store-bought Chinese. The high-end stores he passed made him wonder if Jennifer ever shopped in them. Everything reeked of high dollar. So much money. For what? Stuff. Entering the square at the Duomo, Parker was attacked with the icy welcome of a crisp swirl of cold air. He was a few minutes early, so he took a seat on a bench facing the cathedral. He had studied up on its greatness during his flight. Its massiveness and intricately sculpted statues and Gothic spirals were impressive, but nonetheless a little too spiky for Parker's liking. Like a true introvert, people-watching was a favorite pastime in crowds, and there was plenty to watch here. The square was full of people and pigeons moving about, staying out of each other's way like a house full of family. Many of them wore the designated attire of cap, coat, and scarf Parker was to watch for. He pulled the messenger bag containing the Picasso closer to his body. How would he ever determine who his contact was? He would have to figure it out somehow. He couldn't afford to mess up and lose another job. He made eye contact with each man appropriately dressed, hoping they were looking for him as well. How would his contact even find him? Henry hadn't instructed him to wear anything in particular. This was going to be impossible. What was Henry thinking? A nearby clock tower chimed, followed by one or two others far away. It was time. Parker remembered what Henry had said about carrying valuable goods and possible danger. Was he being careful? Did he look suspicious? Was he in danger? Finally, a man approached him. Parker made a quick visual check. Beret, scarf, dark glasses, overcoat.
You have something for me?
The man asked with a generous Italian accent. Parker smiled.
Hi, yes, sir.
He removed the case from his bag and held it out to the man. Just as the man reached for the case, a jogger in a gray hoodie sprinted by, knocked the client to the ground, and snatched the case from Parker's hand.
Hey, come back here!
Parker started after him, but quickly lost him in the crowd. He turned back toward the buyer, but didn't see him either, until he glanced down. His buyer lay face down on the ground, his hat off to the side. Parker rushed back to him. "Mister, are you okay?" He rolled the man over, revealing a wet red spot on his shirt that grew wider by the moment, and a black-handled Bowie knife stuck right in the middle. A woman screamed. Another peered over Parker's shoulder and spouted off Italian in rapid fire. More people gathered around. Parker looked around at the group in desperation. Then he glanced off in the direction the attacker had bolted. He was long gone.
No avese lungo. Eliminare il senso.
Came a voice from behind. Then another.
Muovese, per favore.
2 policemen were dispersing onlookers and making their way to Parker.
Che cosa sta succedendo qui? Quello che è successo?
One asked Parker. Parker stood up. I don't speak Italian. Speak English? One of the officers huffed. Parker imagined him cursing Americans or tourists or both. The officer grabbed Parker's arm while the other radioed for assistance. Parker protested, but to no avail. He decided it best to cooperate. The officers drove him to a nearby police station and placed him in an interrogation room. After a lengthy wait, a police detective strolled in, sat down at the interview table across from Parker, and smiled. Not a particularly friendly smile, more like a patronizing one.
Forgive my officers for only speaking their native language.
His accent was heavy, but his grasp of English seemed good enough.
Now, tell me, who is this dead man, and how do you know him?
Parker shook his head. I don't. He bought a painting, actually a drawing, from my uncle, and I was delivering it.
And where's this drawing?
It was stolen by the man who stabbed him. Parker paused to consider. This was now 2 bodies he had come across in about as many months.
What did you see?
The detective continued. I was handing over the drawing that was in a small aluminum case. He demonstrated the size with his hands. Then from out of nowhere, this guy in a gray hoodie jogs by, grabs the case, and runs off. I started after him, but when I turned back toward the buyer, he was on the ground. It wasn't until I rolled him over and saw the blood that I...
A mysterious man in a hoodie. Americans like the criminals in the dark hoodies, no?
You think I'm making it up?
No. It was a joke.
The detective stood up and strolled around to Parker's side of the table.
But no one else seems to have seen this man in the hoodie.
But they had to. Somebody. He was there.
Which way did he run?
Into the Galleria. But then I lost track of him after everything. His words trailed off. The detective grinned and left the room. Parker propped his elbows on the table and slowly lowered his head into his hands. He had asked to make a phone call, but apparently you aren't entitled to that in Italy. All he could think about was Amanda Knox. What have I gotten into? God, please help me. I don't want to spend years in an Italian jail. I don't know what to do. Please help me. Please get me out of here. 3 hours went by with Parker sitting by himself in the dingy room with a metal table and 2 metal chairs. Of course, there was the big one-way mirror window. He wondered if the policemen were watching him this whole time to see what he would do. What could he do? Nothing but pray. He paced every inch of the small room, muttering under his breath to God. When he tired of pacing, he sat down for a while. Then he stood back up and paced, up and down, until he finally collapsed in the metal chair, rested his head on the table under his crossed arms, and closed his eyes. Maybe, if he fell asleep, when he woke up, it would have all been a dream, and the nightmare would be over. A few minutes later, the door opened. A man in a dark suit stood in the doorway, watching him. Parker didn't know him, but he knew Parker. "Come with me, Mr. Madison," ordered Carlyle, Henry's government contact. Parker, still cautious, followed the stranger out of the room and down the hallway. "Am I free to go?" "Yes." "Who are you? Are you from the embassy or something?" Carlyle didn't answer. Once outside, Carlyle gripped Parker's elbow, steered him toward a long black Mercedes with tinted windows parked by the curb. Parker resisted. He'd seen too many movies and crime shows to just get into a dark vehicle with someone he'd never seen before. Carlyle opened the back door of the car. "Get in, please." "No." Parker jerked his arm away and stepped back. "Who are you? Whose car is this?" Then he glanced into the back seat and saw a pair of long, lean, tan legs on the other side. Curiosity got the best of him. He ducked down to peer inside. She wore a dark hat and sunglasses, but he saw through the disguise. "Jennifer?" She blew a puff of smoke upwards and crushed out her cigarette in the ashtray.
Get in, Parker.
He glanced at Carlyle, who was still holding the door, then slipped into the seat beside his cousin. Carlyle closed the door and watched the car cruise away. He took his cell phone from an inside coat pocket and made a call. "This is Carlyle. She has him. You were right. He trusts her. Once he saw her, he cooperated fully." "Yes, sir. I will." He returned the phone to his pocket and hailed a taxi.
Jennifer, what are you doing here? Parker asked. I believe the more appropriate question is, what are you doing in an Italian jail?
I wasn't in jail. I was being questioned about a murder. Again, he said with some agitation.
You killed someone?
No! I was delivering this stupid Rooster drawing for Uncle Henry, and the buyer was stabbed, and the drawing was stolen in broad daylight. Uncle Henry's going to be really upset with me when he finds out, he said, scratching his head.
Henry already knows. That's why I'm here.
Parker groaned. So, who is that guy back there?
A lawyer, maybe. I don't know.
She took off her hat and glasses and turned toward Parker.
Are you okay?
She looked him up and down.
Were you raped?
No! She smiled. I'm glad you find all this so entertaining, Parker scowled. Jennifer leaned toward the driver.
Stiamo andando verso l'aeroporto.
Si, the driver replied.
Grazie.
How many languages do you speak? Parker asked her.
Enough.
So, where are we going? Parker asked.
To the airport.
We're going home?
You're going back to the estate. I'm opening for Gautier in a few hours. I have to get back to Paris before they miss me.
My other bag, it's back at the hotel.
It's in the trunk.
They walked into the airport together. Jennifer donned her hat and sunglasses once again. She hooked her arm in his and steered him through the moving crowd toward a suave-looking man waiting for them.
Raphael,
she said with a smile. They shared a familiar kiss on the lips, and Jennifer introduced them. Raphael was a good 10 years older than Jennifer, exotically handsome, with dark, almost shoulder-length hair combed back, a neatly trimmed mustache and beard, and one diamond earring. He wore a slim-fitting houndstooth sport coat with coordinating silk pocket square and expensive leather dress shoes with no socks. He nodded to Parker. Bonjour.
Hello, Parker replied. Your plane ticket was sent to your phone, Jennifer said. Your gate is that way.
She pointed to the right. Parker took out his phone and pulled up the ticket, then observed the long, busy hallway. Jennifer removed her glasses and kissed him softly on the cheek. She laid a hand on his chest and peered into his eyes.
You'll stay out of trouble?
Parker smiled.
I'll do my best.
Come, mon chéri, we must go. Raphael held out his hand to Jennifer.
I'll see you in a couple of weeks,
she said to Parker, then strolled away arm in arm with her French companion. Parker sighed and watched them until they vanished into the crowd. As he turned to his right to find his gate, he saw a man several yards away that looked remarkably like the mysterious man who had gained his release from the police station. The man disappeared into the Burger King. Parker pursued curiously, but by the time he got there, the man was nowhere in sight. Well, that was an adventure. Thanks for listening. Be sure to check out all the related links in the show notes. Next time, Parker finds out what this trip was really all about. Or maybe not everything.